Peace and blessings, everyone. I hope we're all doing well. Today, I'm going to launch the first of many discussions of Toni Morrison's Beloved, one of my favorite texts. And I must be honest, when I first read this text in undergraduate school, I hated it. I didn't understand it. I don't know that I was necessarily engaged in reading it, but I revisited it and since I've begun teaching it in my AP literature courses, every time I read it, I kind of fall in love with it all over again. So, over these series of YouTube videos, what I'll be doing is just, a little read aloud of the text, but stopping at critical spaces to just kind of discuss what's happening and maybe bring some clarity to people who find this book to be super confusing, super complex, super hate it. And maybe I can take you from like hating it to, okay, I can deal with it, or I can take you from dealing with it to tolerating it and tolerating it to eventually loving it. So, this is the version that I'm reading. If you want to follow along, I don't know when this was published. I bought this in undergrad, so it's super old. But the copyright date on this is 1987. And the first page here, it says a blank 60 million and more. And then she brings in a verse from Romans 9:25 on the first page here. It says, "I will call them my people, which were not my people, and her beloved, which was not beloved." We tend to call this book beloved, but if you have read it, you can also understand the interpretation of beloved. It's about, finding that self love and that getting rid of self hatred. So we can say beloved, but the character is beloved. So the text opens with chapter one. And again, if you have this version, you'll notice that the book is broken into parts. So part one has this um, illustration here, if you will. And I just wanted to show you, and this book is full of all like my little post-it notes. Um, and I'm gonna take this sticky so it doesn't like ruin everything. But then you look at two, and this is the beginning of part two, and you see that the illustration is a bit changed. And then if you just sneak a peek on part three, which is a shorter part, it's the shortest part of the book. But then part three, we're back to a similar illustration from the beginning, but it resembles a skeleton. Everything that Toni Morrison does, I'm convinced, has meaning. And this is just general, like I know. Oh, and this is the one on the front cover. I come from the school of thought that until you can prove otherwise, you should assume that everything that's in a text, everything, even with film, right? Everything that's there is there for a reason. It has a purpose. So just be mindful of all of this as you're reading the book. So I'll begin the reading. It says 124 was spiteful, full of baby's venom. The women in the house knew it, and so did the children. For years, each put up with the spite in his own way. But by 1873, Setha and her daughter Denver were its only victims. The grandmother, baby Suggs, was dead, and the sons, Howard and Bugler, had run away by the time they were 13 years old, as soon as merely looking in a mirror shattered it. That was the original sign for Bugler. As soon as two tiny handprints appeared in the cake, that was it for Howard. Neither boy waited to see more. Another kettleful of chickpeas smoking in a heap on the floor. Soda crackers crumbled and strewn in a line next to the door sill. Nor did they wait for one of the relief periods, the weeks, months even, when nothing was disturbed. No, each one fled at once. The moment the house committed what was for him the one insult not to be borne or witnessed a second time. Within 2 months, in the dead of winter, leaving their grandmother, baby Suggs, Setha, their mother, and their little sister, Denver, all by themselves in the gray and white house on Bluestone Road. It didn't have a number then, because Cincinnati didn't stretch that far. In fact, Ohio had been calling itself a state only 70 years when the first one brother, and then the next, stuffed quilt packing into his hat, snatched up his shoes, and crept away from the lively spite the house felt for them. So I always pause here when I read the book and just take stock of all the things that are happening because the text has given us very much information. And if we just keep reading along, we might find ourselves lost in trying to figure out the details. So when we say 1, 2, 4 was spiteful, we don't find out until the end of this introductory paragraph that 1, 2, 4 is actually referring to the house. It begins with 1, 2, 4 was spiteful, and the paragraph ends with they crept away from the lively spite the house felt for them. So not only do we understand what 1, 2, 4 is and that it's the house, but we have some understanding that at least in Howard and Bugler's case, they believe this spite was an attack on them personally. They didn't feel like the spite of this baby's venom was directed toward perhaps the women in the house, but they felt threatened. So 1, 2, 4 was spiteful, full of baby's venom. And then we have these series of events that happen, right? Howard and Bugler had run away by the time they were 13 years old. So we have fairly young boys who've run away from home. As soon as merely looking in a mirror shattered it, look in a mirror, crack, gone. Okay. As soon as two tiny handprints appeared in the cake. Okay. So these are descriptions of hauntings that are happening in this house. It says neither boy waited to see more, but then we as readers understand that some other haunting or supernatural things have happened in this home. We find out that another kettle full of chickpeas smoking in a heap on the floor. We see soda crackers crumbled and strewn in a line next to the door sill. The boys didn't stay to see that. So what we learn as readers is that this haunting and these phenomena continued to happen in the house even after the boys left. So it wasn't directed towards them at all, but that's how they internalized it. It said, nor did they wait for one of the relief periods, the weeks, months even, when nothing was disturbed. So there would be these periods of time when nothing would happen. And then they would have these supernatural occurrences. And so they left. And then we also find out that our setting is Cincinnati, Ohio. We know that it's 1873, and we know that this house has been here before the road was even named. And I just, put a breadcrumb there, okay? Because the whole idea of the building of community and pillars of community and who names and when naming happens and when identity is formed, all of this will be important later on in the text. So we'll read a little bit more. We've gotten through one paragraph in 10 minutes. Okay, so it says Baby Suggs, who we know is the grandmother. Baby Suggs didn't even raise her head. From her sick bed, she heard them go, but that wasn't the reason she lay still. It was another to her that her grandsons had taken so long to realize that every house wasn't like the one on Bluestone Road. Suspended between the nastiness of life and the meanness of the dead, she couldn't get interested in leaving life or living it, let alone the fright of two creeping off boys. Her past had been like her present, intolerable. And since she knew death was anything but forgetfulness, she used the little energy left her for pondering color. Bring a little lavender in, if you got any, pink if you don't. And Setha would oblige her with anything from fabric to her own tongue. Winter in Ohio was especially rough if you had an appetite for color. Sky provided the only drama, and counting on a Cincinnati horizon for life's principal joy was reckless indeed. So Setha and the girl Denver did what they could and what the house permitted for her. Together, they waged a perfunctory battle against the outrageous behavior of that place, against turned over slop jars, smacks on the behind, and gusts of sour air. For they understood the source of the outrage as well as they knew the source of light. Baby Suggs died shortly after the brothers left, with no interest whatsoever in their leave taking or hers. And right afterward, Setha and Denver decided to end the persecution by calling forth the ghost that tried them so. Perhaps a conversation, they thought, an exchange of views or something would help. So they held hands and said, "Come on, come on. You may as well just come on." So now we have Setha and Denver who are left in this home. Howard and Bugler have abandoned. Baby Suggs has died. And so it's just the two of them left. And after all these years, the two of them have decided that they're going to try to communicate, if you will, with this ghost, a seance of some sort. And they're calling the baby or the ghost forward to try to get some clarity, have a conversation because they're tired of going through these experiences and they want to know more. So the text continues. It says the sideboard took a step forward, but nothing else did. Grandma Baby must be stopping it, said Denver. She was 10 and still mad at Baby Suggs for dying. Setha opened her eyes. I doubt that, she said. Then why don't it come? You forgetting how little it is, said her mother. She wasn't even 2 years old when she died. Too little to understand. Too little to talk much even. Maybe she don't want to understand, said Denver. Maybe. But if she'd only come, I could make it clear to her. Setha released her daughter's hand, and together they pushed the sideboard back against the wall. Outside, a driver whipped his horse into the gallop local people felt necessary when they passed 124. So that line there tells us that there's also some sense in the community that something's amiss at 124. I don't know if you've ever seen like scary films where like there's the one house that nobody wants to go by and the kids kind of like run past it or pick up speed when it's time for them to walk or ride their bikes past the home. So we get the sense that it's not just kids in this sense, it's grown people who know that something's not right at 124. And the man, it says, once outside, a driver whipped his horse into the gallop local people felt necessary when they passed 124. So they kind of pick up speed a little bit. They don't want to linger for too long outside that house. We also get the sense that this ghost is not violent. If the ghost had intentions of hurting them, I think it would have been done by now. It just seems like little acts of mischief that are happening around the house from time to time. And even in their attempt to communicate with the ghost, they've only been able to summon it to move a floorboard or a sideboard, I should say. And other than that, everything was left untouched. So we'll read a little bit more of the text and then I'll leave you with some thoughts. Maybe we'll pick up where we left off. For baby, she throws a powerful spell, said Denver. No more powerful than the way I loved her, Setha answered. And there it was again. The welcoming cool of unchiseled headstones. The one she selected to lean against on tiptoe, her knees wide open as any grave. Pink as a fingernail it was, and sprinkled with glittering chips. 10 minutes, he said. You got 10 minutes. I'll do it for free. 10 minutes for 7 letters. With another 10, could she have gotten dearly, too? She had not thought to ask him, and it bothered her still that it might have been possible. That for 20 minutes, a half hour, say, she could have had the whole thing. Every word she heard the preacher say at the funeral, and all there was to say, surely. engraved on her baby's headstone, dearly beloved. But what she got settled for was the one word that mattered. She thought it would be enough, writing among the headstones with the engraver, his young son looking on, the anger in his face so old, the appetite in it quite new. That should certainly be enough. Enough to answer one more preacher, one more abolitionist, and a town full of disgust. So I'm going to pause there, okay, because a lot has happened. I know it's been one paragraph, and I know I keep stopping. and I'm going to wrap this up in a minute. But when we look at with this text, what folks find the most confusing is that time is not stable. And there are no indications, very few indications of when time is moving from the present to the past or to the future. So time becomes this fluid entity, and the boundaries between space and time are encroached quite often. And the only thing that you can everything is in past tense. So it's not even like you can rely on the verb tenses to get some indication of when time is shifting because everything is being told from the future. So all of these events are in past tense. Um, but we do shift in time, or we go to one of Setha's flashbacks. Um, there it was again. There'll be little um, I don't know if you can see this on the text, right? But here, I can't read this, right? No more powerful than the way I loved her, said the answer. And then it says, and there it was again. So you'll get little indications throughout the text, little things like that, that denote that we are being thrust very abruptly into a flashback. And there's no break in a paragraph that we're used to seeing. There are no extra line breaks that give us any indication. It's just we're there and bam, and we have to figure it all out. Morrison does that, I believe, for a reason. My interpretation is that she wants to bring you fully into this experience that Seth is having. Setha doesn't have any control over these memories that are just, being recalled at random. They'll be, and this is usually the way that memory works, especially when you have trauma. You don't have any control of when those memories are called upon. You have no clue of how something's going to hit you, when it's going to hit you. And that's the trauma that Morrison, this disorientation, if you will, she wants to put us into. So she wants it to be as real and authentic for us as the reader as it is for Setha in that moment. And we're thrust immediately into a not a very negative memory, a very traumatic memory, where uh, the engraver is trading sexual favors with Setha or letters on a headstone. So that's the evil of that. So she's trying to get letters to put on her dead baby's headstone. And so for ten minutes for 7 letters, 10 minutes worth of sexual favor will earn you 7 letters on your baby's headstone. And in her memory, what she regrets is not doing that, but the fact that, darn it, if I had given 30 minutes, maybe I could have gotten the whole thing, right? Maybe I could have earned the right to add dearly to the beloved on my baby's headstone. So we see, we might think, oh, well, maybe she regrets doing it. She has no regrets for what she's done. Her only regret is that she could have done more. Okay. So we're midway through page 5 of the text. But what I'd like to leave you with, and something to consider in this text, is regret and reconsideration of things that have happened in the past, and the way that regret works in this particular text and for Setham. Um, the choices that she had to make, and the situations that she had to place herself into, We don't know what happened with this baby. We don't know the circumstances around this baby's death. But all we know is that there was a baby. So it wasn't even like a fullness of life. And think about the abrupt shift from present tense to flashback, but also think about how this mirrors the abrupt ending of the baby's life. Baby who dies is, that's abrupt. I don't think that we can ever say that we expect those sorts of things. So have that on your minds, and we'll get back together soon and have another discussion. I hope this was helpful, at least to orient you in the text if there was any confusion. And like I said, I'm not sure that we'll read everything word for word, but we will go through some key things. And whenever you're reading a complex text, I just think it's important to spend some time in the beginning to make sure that you get what's happening. Because if you keep reading and you're confused at the beginning, you're never going to figure it out. And I think that's the one of the largest mistakes that I made when I was in undergrad. So feel free to comment. Let me know what your thoughts are. If you have any questions about this part of the text, maybe I can try to answer them for you. We'll see how this goes. But until next time, I wish you the best. Peace and love. Have a good night.